Yes, this Tory shot me. You shot me.
A jury has found rapper Tory Lanez guilty of shooting fellow rapper Megan Thee Stallion.
Not only did the defendant do the heinous act of shooting her, he then subjected her to 2.5 years of hell.
Today we have Meghann Cuniff, a.k.a. Megan the Reporter, who became the main person covering the Tory Lanez trial directly from the L.A. courthouse.
You certainly seem to be on the hottest cases out in L.A.
Were you a Meghan fan before?
How could you not be a fan of the two women who did the WAP song?
Hey everybody, I'm Alana, and welcome back to yet another episode of Acknowledged, a podcast where we shine light on the hidden heroes of pop culture history. For those new here, I've been a journalist and video producer in the culture and entertainment space for about 10 years now, so I am super excited about this guest. Meghann Cuniff, aka Megan the Reporter, has been dominating our Twitter feeds, covering everything from the Tory Lanez Megan Thee Stallion case, the YSL case, and most recently, the Diddy case. So we're diving deep into her coverage, her journey into journalism, and her iconic response to Tory Lanez calling her a, quote, googly-eyed bitch. If you're down to hear from Megan, and if you're down to hear from some of our other hidden heroes we've given flowers to, please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Also, we're now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so please take this time to click the link below, leave a nice review. It really does help a lot. There's a lot to get into, so let's get into it. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time. I feel like you're everywhere covering everything at all times, so the fact that you even just took the time, I'm very grateful. Usually, this podcast is meant to shine light on people behind the scenes of major pop culture events. But I feel like for you, this is such an inaccuracy because I feel like you're so integral to so many different stories. So anyway, I'd like to start at the top. How did you get into covering the law? First of all, feel free to introduce yourself. And then how did you get into covering law?
Sure. I'm Meghann Cuniff. I'm a reporter in Southern California, and I specialize in legal affairs reporting. And I got into the law by through the traditional newspaper route. I was fortunate to spend my early career, most of my 20s, at a newspaper in Spokane, Washington, that family-owned newspaper that really punched above its weight. And it was a very cops and courts-oriented newspaper. It was known as a reporter's newspaper, where the reporters had a lot of control and influence in the newsroom. And cops and courts was a big deal. The cops were always up to something in Spokane. There was federal law enforcement. That's where the white supremacists are. And the Spokesman Review had kind of a long, proud history of really going after stuff and going after reporting. So I was used to going over to Spokane County Superior Court and covering arraignments, covering murder cases. But it really wasn't until I moved down to California and started working at the Los Angeles Daily Journal that I felt like I really became a legal affairs reporter. I wanted to break out and kind of use my knowledge that I gained there to like do more mainstream reporting. So that's what I've tried to do by kind of using that knowledge for celebrity reporting.
Well, tried is an understatement because you obviously are. What I want to know is because, you know, when I got into journalism, there was a few stories that made me say like, oh my God, like this is exactly the beat I want to cover. Was there ever a story for you that you covered and was like, immediately, yes, I want to cover law. I want to cover anything dealing with this. Like, this is my beat.
Yeah, the first big story, the first big court story that I got really into and was just so into covering every twist and turn, and then she went to trial and I was just infatuated with it, was a woman in Spokane. She murdered her husband, and the story was she was put up to it by her John-turned-boyfriend. She advertised online as a prostitute named Nikita Jennifer, and her name was Shelley Stark. It was my first foray into true crime TV. I did a show on the Oxygen channel about the Shelley Stark case, and it was like, you know, kind of my moment on the map.
So you cover this case, you're like, oh my God, this is so interesting, and kind of getting drawn to it. Fast forward, you're covering numerous entertainment cases from Harvey Weinstein to Cardi B to the ongoing YSL case. But a lot of mainstream internet has met you through your coverage of Tory Lanez and the Megan Thee Stallion case. First of all, what were the specifics about this case that drew you to it?
You know, it really was just a matter of working for Law and Crime at the time, lawandcrime.com, Law and Crime Network, and already been at that courthouse for the last couple of months covering the Harvey Weinstein and the Danny Masterson case. And just knowing that the Lanez case was starting to, and that, Nancy from Rolling Stone and some other reporters were covering it. And I was like, well, as long as we're waiting for the jury in the Weinstein case, I might as well go cover the Tory Lanez case. And then immediately noticing that there was so much attention online, but I think it was like the second or third day that things started to go viral. But no, I really did not expect the huge attention that my reporting got on it at all. It was kind of cool. And so I just went in and did my thing. If you look back at my tweets about the Weinstein case, there weren't as many of them because they weren't getting, I wasn't going viral with them, but it's the same kind of tweets, me smart mouthing the judges and the LA Superior Court system, complaining about LA Superior Court PIO's office, and then saying who the witnesses are and that kind of thing, just what's going on with the Weinstein trial. Is the same kind of thing.
Were you a Meghan fan before this whole cover started?
I would never say that I disliked her. I mean, I'd be like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm a fan. I mean, I knew who she was, and I had covered Cardi B's trial. And so, how could you not be a fan of the two women who did the WAP song? And I actually have a joke. It's still a tweet that only has 27 likes or something. But a couple days before the trial, I tweeted yeah, I'm going to be covering the Tory Lanez trial for he's accused of shooting Megan Thee Stallion. All I know is, and I added Nancy from Rolling Stone. I said, we're really excited to be able to say that we covered testimony by the two women responsible for the WAP song in two separate trials within 3 months, because she covered Cardi B too. So, I mean, I'd never say that I disliked her, but I wasn't, I didn't have any of her CDs or download her songs or anything.
It's so crazy because despite all that, you became such a voice for so many people on Twitter. How do you feel about being dubbed Megan the Reporter? Because I'll tell you what, I was so excited about this interview that I'm like, guys, I got Megan the Reporter. And it's for me, that's your last name. And I told myself, Alana, please do not call this woman Megan the Reporter on this podcast. But it's such an iconic moniker. What was your first reaction when people were sort of calling you that?
But I wasn't quite sure what to think about it. I mean, I liked it. I was like, oh, that's cool. I remember it was, I think it was on the internet, but I'm so busy covering the trial. And then when you get out of the breaks, you're just tweeting. So you kind of don't really have time to go through all your replies. So I was kind of missing all that stuff. But I did an interview with Jesse Weber, the host for Law and Crime Network Sidebar. And he was like, Megan the Reporter. That was the first time I heard it. I was like, okay, that's pretty hilarious. But then, yeah, I mean, like Black Twitter, really embraced it. I was like, this is awesome. But at first I was like, okay, I mean, I don't want to just steal her nickname, first of all. And, be professional kind of thing. Yeah. But it's really stuck. And I don't want that to just be my brand. I like legal affairs and trials with Meghann Cuniff. I'm a legal affairs journalist. But, I picked up meganthereporter.com for my Shopify store. And it kind of sold me over. I mean, a couple of people, my friend from college who hosts the Journal, the Wall Street Journal podcast, Ryan Knutson, he's a serious journalist. He was like, I think you got to embrace it. And then Matt Hamilton from the LA Times once tweeted something and just called me Megan the Reporter on Twitter. And I'm like, okay, I think I've got to embrace it. Don't make that my primary name. Right. Yeah, I mean, come on.
I think you're very good at embracing whatever is thrown at you. We make jokes, but at the end of the day, it was a very serious case that really affected, Megan Thee Stallion. It affected a lot of her fans. It affected, of course, for better or worse, Tory Lanez's fans too. Of the backlash that you received, what was the most surprising?
The most surprising thing was how it lingered after the trial. I was a little taken aback by some of the hatred, but also with just the sheer numbers I was dealing with during the trial. It's it comes with it. I mean, I could tell stories back in Spokane. I actually did a YouTube video talking about, hate mail back in the day we used to get, and all the flack I'd get online when I covered certain cases in Spokane. So I'm kind of used to that. What surprised me was how it lasted after the trial. Because after he got convicted, it was okay, it's done. He'll be sentenced. I figured that would happen sooner than it did. But there was so much hype. People did not seem to realize that it really was over after that. There was all this internet talk about it. And it took me a while to realize that a lot of them were talking about me. Well, maybe not a lot of them, but a couple in particular, one in particular, was talking about me. And a couple of people messaged me because they saw me trying to respond to a couple critics on Twitter who are blatantly just being like sent after me by this one person who hosts a radio show or something. So it took me a while to realize, I'm like, God, some of these people are obsessed with me. And when I would talk to my friends about it, like I said, universally, like the most common thing people would tell me when I'd kind of detail this or show them some posts, they'd be like, be careful. Like, yeah. Who are these people? They're obsessed with me. I was never really like actually concerned for my physical. It's still, I mean, it's like, it was just annoying, like the internet harassment that happened. But, you got to have a thick skin, and it kind of comes with the game. But it was just surprising how personally invested some people were in me. Like, not my coverage, like me personally.
Tory Lanez used his final statements to call you out. And then you made merch out of it.
Guys, it's Megan. 1, I just got a haircut. 2, I've got Googly-Eyed Bitch and Megan Thee Reporter merchandise in for sale.
Yes.
That's iconic in so many ways. First of all, what was your reaction? Forgive me, I'm going to quote it. Him call you a, quote, Googly-Eyed bitch, and then you making merch out of it. Like, what was the timeline of those events?
My first reaction when I heard it, because I actually saw tweets about it from like his supporters, because I'd heard him say something, and another reporter had asked me out in the hallway, like, hey, did you hear what he said? And I said, and I didn't. But then I saw all these tweets saying, oh, he called her a googly-eyed bitch. And I had no reason to disbelieve it. But I mean, I kind of thought to myself, and I kind of think, like a journalist. So when I heard, oh, he called me a googly-eyed bitch, that's a good story. Like, if it was the sentencing still would have been the biggest deal. But this was like his bail motion hearing, where it was given that he wasn't going to get bail. So easily the biggest news became him calling me a googly-eyed bitch. But, I didn't want to just take this, although, like I said, I had no reason to disbelieve it. Probably better do a little more checking than just take this one tweet about it. So I actually emailed the prosecutor, Alex Bott, and when he responded, I think he was like a little worried that I was going to be upset about it or something. He's like, yeah, it was definitely, he's like, I'm not sure if he said your name, but it was definitely like googly-eyed bitch or some variation of that, and various sheriff deputies heard it. I was like, okay, that's kind of awesome. And one of my friends was like, I hope you're not upset about that, because that is freaking iconic. So yeah, no, you can't be upset about it. And then I was like, yeah, let's do a logo about it. Yeah.
You know that shit. Like, that is such a slay. So how do you maintain such thick skin? I can't imagine that amount of volume being thrown at you.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've been dealing with, because it has just been kind of a lot. And I always say that period was good for my career, but bad for my health. Mm-hmm. And it's good to be able to work from home and, get back into exercise, like visiting national parks, going on, like having big goals, like outdoor activity goals. And that's one good thing about living in Southern California. And one thing I try not to take for granted, having grown up in the Northwest, is like almost every day is a sunny day down here. So that makes it easy. You can try to get out and do stuff. But especially in the last, few months, that I'm like, okay, like, I am Megan the reporter. Like, I don't think this is going to go away, kind of thing. Like, I could probably take a couple weeks off and still be Megan the reporter. So I'm trying to find a balance right now between just like working all the time and also like going out and forgetting about it,
Definitely. And I hate to like bring them back to work. And I know you're probably personally tired of hearing and talking about this, but I do want to move on a little bit to current events. Diddy. Yeah. So you spoke actually a lot about your desires against speculating on this case. So first, before we get into it, what are some of the misinformation you've seen circulating?
The one I saw, and it was just a headline, but people are conflating the civil case and the criminal investigation. Because on the one hand, we have had reputable news sources like Richard Winton at the Los Angeles Times, who I respect. I know he's a good journalist, and he has sources in law enforcement who aren't going to want to say, oh yeah, put my name on that and print it in the article that I'm the one who told you this is about sex trafficking. But when he prints an article that says law enforcement officials have confirmed this is about the sex trafficking allegations, like, we can believe that. But anything other than that, we haven't had any kind of information about who this involves or anything like that. And the biggest thing is, I saw like Cuba Gooding Jr. has been added to that Tyrone Blackmore and Little Rod amended complaint. The judge actually hasn't approved the filing of the most recent amended complaint. He probably will. But Cuba Gooding Jr. is now named in that. And I saw some TV station put a headline up saying, "Oh, Cuba Gooding Jr. has now been named in this criminal investigation into Diddy." And that, I mean, we don't know. Like, it's just kind of puts you in a conundrum to talk about it, because he hasn't been named in it, but you also can't say that he's not part of it, because we don't really know anything about this investigation at all. So, but I can understand the huge interest in it. And I think what we can do is just talk about the procedure and the facts that we're dealing with. Like, because we don't know if he's going to be charged with a crime. If they had enough to charge him with a crime, like, they would have just charged him with a crime. But clearly, if they're searching his house, this is a criminal investigation, and they had to show a judge that there's probable cause to believe a crime was committed, and that they're going to find evidence of it. So, I mean, as I said on Twitter, it's a BFD. You know, it's definitely a BFD. But just to be like, okay, so when's he going to be charged with a crime? Oh, well, I think by the end of the month he'll be indicted. It's just like, gosh, guys, let's calm down a little bit here. And if you point out that he hasn't been charged with a crime, simply like, "Oh, why are you defending Diddy?" It's like, well, I'm just trying to, it's like, I mean, but I feel like, journalist wise, until he's charged with a crime, it's like there's not really much that you do. But just to speculate about what he could be charged with and all that, it's just like, and to say that, oh, he's likely going to be charged with a crime, because on the one hand, it seems, I mean, they're searching his house, it looks pretty serious, but you just, it's hard to say how far they are in the investigation. But one interesting thing is, I was trying to think of the criminal investigations into celebrities. I mean, Diddy is a pretty major celebrity. I mean, and he's more than just a music star or a celebrity. I mean, he's a business mogul. Yes. So I'm trying to think of, in terms of investigations, into prominent people, this is pretty up there. So it's just highly sensitive.
It's so sensitive. I know that there have been advocates for Diddy, calling this like an excessive use of police force, breaking into his house and doing these raids, which is not really a break-in, because I'm sure that they had the ability to go in legally. I think it's just also becoming now, because there aren't a lot of answers, like a court of public opinion. So from like a journalist perspective, with that rise of social media, and with also your status in social as like almost like a go-to person on social media for news, do you find that traditional journalism is dead? Do you find that social media is that new frontier of journalism? And how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I hope traditional journalism isn't dead, but I do think the medium and the platform is dead. And it's not the journalist's fault. I mean, the people who own newspapers have been at this for a long time, kind of ruining them. And just the companies that we have operating newspapers, and the lack of ability of newsrooms to adapt to social media, I think, is just the hugest problem. Because, yeah, I mean, as an independent journalist, I'm able to do more on social media, and I have this like wide open platform that I'm like, okay, I have such a big TikTok following, and I'm trying to figure out how to, instead of, only ever posting clips from the Young Thug trial, I'd like to make more videos about other stories that I cover. It's just a matter of like having the resources to do that and stuff, and having the people to do that. And I think, newsrooms should get into that more, because that's kind of where everyone is. But I can also see, you don't want to just make your newsroom all about like a TikTok platform. You got to diversify. But yeah, it just seems like, unless you're a big national outlet like the Washington Post or the New York Times, I mean, all the local places are struggling, and that's where the heart of everything is local news. So
it really is. I had the opportunity to do a little bit of local news when I first started in journalism, and seeing how, I don't know, there's so much care that was given to those stories. Another thing that was super important that I saw on your website was something you wrote, which is kind of like the iconic like sass that you have sometimes. But it's important. You written and reported on a few important articles lately, from the plights of mentally ill women jailed for civil contempt with LA Fitness to the public corruption trial of longtime City of Los Angeles employee. But of course, all anyone wants me to do is speculate about whether hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs might be charged with a crime. Do you think that the rise in popularity from your celebrity coverage acted almost as a hindrance in a way that's preventing other people to put the same effort and energy into the other things that you're covering?
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of worry because I've kind of struggled back and forth with, do I keep with the kind of LA legal nerd beating? Like those two stories that I mentioned were, way more journalistic, and I got, way more fulfillment out of it than just another obsession piece about Diddy. It's just kind of depressing on how little attention non-celebrity news gets. I mean, and part of it is just, it just kind of feels like a local story. But I think that's one thing I see as like a challenge that I want to kind of give myself in the next few years is how can I use my large platforms and my audience to bring attention to non-celebrity stories and presents them in an engaging way and makes people learn something about the court system. And I think a good example is a story I did recently on a mentally ill woman who had been sued by LA Fitness because she has a mental illness where she thinks that she works at LA Fitness. She used to work there like 10 years ago, but she's been going around to all these different gyms, harassing employees, but also really elaborate stuff, like taking out like bank accounts and email accounts to LA Fitness names, like hiring people on behalf of LA Fitness and all sorts of stuff. So they sued her in LA federal court, and she ended up being held in civil contempt of court. She wasn't getting mental health treatment, and she was just in jail because they let her go to trial by herself. Like, she represented herself in trial. I mean, she should have been declared incompetent, but the judge never gave her a competency hearing. And then when she kept going to LA Fitness because she's mentally ill, he just jailed her and wasn't even really doing anything about it. So when I wrote a story about how this was happening, he called a hearing the next day and dealt with it, like got her mental health treatment, got her out. So I'm like, that's an example of like journalism. And I approached that from my, spokesman review root standpoint of, I reported the story and I wrote it. It was a, long form written article that I mailed out to my Substack mailing list and put on Twitter. But I want to get to the point where I can make videos about that. Like,
that's what I was going to say. That's a video right there. Just exactly.
There's surveillance video over two at LA Fitness. So there's already some B-roll there. It's just, I don't have those kind of video skills. And frankly, I just get a little busy with stuff. I want to get, that's stuff I'm looking into, like refining my website, getting a video producer to kind of help me with stuff, that kind of thing.
Because that's a Cam with that little iconic TikTok mic of saying just like, this LA Fitness just sued this mentally ill person because she thought she worked there or something along those lines, and then just getting into it. People would love that. Yeah. People know you and they're like, oh, I go to Megan Thee Reporter for news. Oh, she's telling me something that I didn't know. I want to read more and learn more. They came for, the Tory Lanez and Diddy tea, and then they stayed for the content. And I think new journalism, that's what it is. It's just trying to find ways to get people in, but still having the substance to keep people there. Okay, guys, that wraps up yet another episode of Acknowledged. And please remember to give flowers when flowers are due. See you guys next time.